What's up everybody, welcome to Balkan Moto. I got my new internal throttle and today we're going to install it. Let's check out the parts. So these are the parts that I bought. This is a throttle cable that is essentially adjustable, so you can cut it to length that you need, and this is what we're going to use for the internal throttle. We have the internal throttle itself, and I'll show you that. Well, I'll take it out and I'll show it to you afterwards. A sleeve for it, which we'll probably end up using with the grips, and these brown Vans grips for the bike. So the idea is that we're going to replace pretty much the throttle assembly. Last time we dewired these, so we're going to replace this entire thing, the throttle itself. This cable will end up retubing it and running it through the handlebars so that this entire area gets cleaned up. And essentially just the levers will remain on this side, lever and mirror, for the time being. So let's take a look at the parts first, got out of the box and packaging, and then we'll start looking at how they're going to fit on there. Alright, so here is the throttle and the sleeve. So the sleeve is just an aluminum machined piece that does fit over the throttle, and you kind of lock it in place with the screws. But that's not, we may not need that, and this is the internal throttle, so you can see it turns like this, so pretty straightforward. I will need to read the instructions to see how to disassemble this so we know how to install it, but essentially we're going to cut the bar to make this fit into it. So let's read through the instructions and take a look at what we're going to do with that. Okay, so after reading the instructions for the installation here, a few things need to be done. So this cable obviously comes with a bead on one end, and that will go on the carburetor side of things. The other end we need to cut to the required length. So this cable is obviously too long for our uses, so we'll need to cut it and cut the end piece to the proper length. This assembly we'll need to disassemble in order to be able to install things properly, and we'll need to cut the handlebars and take off all the stuff from the handlebars. So to begin, before we contaminate any of this stuff, I'm going to put this back in the bag. Let's start disassembling the bike by taking off the pretty much everything that's on this side of the bars. So that we can then start evaluating what to do with it going forward. Alright, I stripped off everything that was attached to the bars. Let's unscrew them here and take them off so we can work on them on the bench instead of on the bike. Alright, bars are off. So a few things need to be done. On the smaller side, we want to clip off or grind off these little pegs here and here that we're holding the cable to the bar. Same with the other side. We'll leave the left side because we're not going to touch those buttons just yet, but eventually these will get grinded off. So yeah, grind these off. We need to cut off 4 inches and 3/4 of an inch piece at the end, and we also need to drill a hole down at the bottom so we can wire things through it, as well as a hole here. I mean, there is one, but that's not big enough. Might need to widen this and reuse it to run the cable coming out for the brake lever. So let's begin with cutting off these guys and then marking off how much we need to cut here and slicing that off. Okay, step 1 done. The little tabs are cut off. Now let's drill a hole on the bottom side, so that we have an access point to fish things through the bars. Alright, we have a hole in the bottom. Now let's cut off 4 inches and 3/4 off the right side. And then we'll see where we gotta put the other hole. Maybe we'll need to extend this one, or we can just put another one for the wire that's gonna go through there. So this is what the bars look like. We cut off the 4 inches and 3/4 from the end, and here's how the internal throttle will look once it's in there. Next, let's do the final modification on here, which is drilling a hole right about here, so that we can run the cable for the brake internally as well. I'm pretty sure it should be able to fit along with the throttle cable without a problem, and should be pretty easy to fish it through. So let's do that. And here we go, I have a hole, and I fished through a harder cable so I can pull through the softer ones. Okay, so bar modifications are done. Next on the list is the all-important throttle cable and figuring out what length we need, cutting that to the appropriate length, and then assembling it to the throttle and attaching the throttle to this. So we'll see how that goes. The seat and the tank off, just so we can have a little bit more room to work with. So next on the list is taking out the old throttle cables. So the V-Star has a push and a pull cable, and we're going to be switching to a pull cable only. So that would be, which one? It'll be this one only. There's enough spring here to like essentially close the carburetors should something happen. So I'm not too worried about the safety aspect of not having a push cable. So let's take off this cover and fish those out and detach them from the carburetor. Okay, the throttle cable is in place. It's hooked up to the carburetor. I had to bend this bracket a bit just because this wasn't clearing the frame. Then we have it up under, then goes into the bar here and comes out there. So now let's cut that. And you'll notice the steering is right now fully to the right, and the bars are kind of leaned forward a little bit extra. That's to make sure that I have plenty of slack there. I can always tuck the slack under, but I can't make the cable longer if it's too short. So let's cut that to length that I need. I believe the instructions said that I need 2 inches and 3/4 of the piece sticking out at the end, and then a bunch of cable casing before the edge. So let's do that. And here's the internal throttle fully installed. I do need to tinker a little bit more with the throttle adjustment down here, but that's pretty good. Let's put the grips on this end and then clean up the other side. Alright, and finally after assembly, here's how things look. The throttle cable goes through the bar, down here, and then around and into the carburetor. We'll need to tweak that a little bit, but essentially this is how clean the right side handlebar is looking. This will get even cleaner once I replace this with something a little bit more minimalistic and some steel braided lines that are a lot thinner than this. The last thing that I haven't done is the wiring for the switch. So this cable, we're actually going to disconnect it again from the plug down there, pull this gray sleeve off and put a thin rubber tube on it, and then we're going to fish it following the throttle cable up to this hole here, from where it will come out and plug in right here. So again, no other cables will be visible on this side. And these are the new Vans grips. They're quite comfortable. This one doesn't seem to be slipping. If it does, then I'll have to adjust so it doesn't slip as much. This one, it rotates a little bit, but the bar under it is still a little wet because I sprayed it with some cleaner. So hopefully once that dries, it will kind of seal it to it. Now the tricky bit is that I've removed the bar end weights, so I'm curious how much the bars will vibrate once the motor is running. But we'll get to that, and if we need to, we can we can probably cut this one and add the bar weight end into it. As for this one, I don't think we will be able to, just because the throttle assembly is there. But either way, that's kind of what we'll do with that. Yeah, so internal throttle done. Okay, so I unplugged the cable. We have the two new cables the tube wrapped cables for the starter buttons, and then we have the old casing here with the brake signal button cable. So what we're going to do is we're going to remove this casing. We're going to cut the tips off, and we're going to put tubing on it like this, just so it's a little bit smaller. I'm going to fully shrink it, then feed it through the bars, and then reinstall the ends on there. And that'll be it. Alright, so I put the plastic tubing on the vinyl tubing, whatever this is, onto the brake signal wire, and I fed it through the bars in and out the other side, where we're going to put the connectors back on and connect them back to this. On this side, we're going to tuck everything back and put the plastic cover back on, so everything's nicely tucked away, and then straighten out the bars, and we're good to go. And here's the wiring for the brake signal. This turned out a little bulky, which I'm not too happy about, but for now it will have to do. We can always figure out better connectors for that, and there seems like there's plenty of slack here to wire it in a way that I can tuck it into the bar a little better. But for now that will do. Throttle works fine. Let's put the tank back on. This got tucked in nicely, so all the cables go through here. Yeah, let's put the tank back on, put the seat back on, and this episode's done. Alright, and bike is fully assembled. I think the look is very much better. The handlebars are nice and clean. There's no buttons here. Throttle works. From the front, we don't have the throttle cables here anymore, or the other cables, so that's much cleaner. This will get cleaned up even more. Same on this side. Once the clutch goes away and this gets internally wired, well actually no, this goes away too. So this is the choke, clutch will go away, and the buttons will get internally wired, so this will look a lot cleaner. But yeah, much better. The brake signal also works, so if we want to do this, and so that works. Now all that remains is taking it for a test ride to see what sort of adjustments we need to make to the throttle. That's it. Alright guys, that was it for this episode. The internal throttle has been installed, and the wires for the right side handlebar have been internally wired through the handlebars. I'm pretty happy with the look. The new grips actually feel pretty awesome as well. So yeah, make sure to subscribe, hit the little bell for notifications when new videos become available. Check me out on Instagram at Balkan 2018, and check out balkanmoto.com. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.